Hey guys, Sam here at NA Studios. In this video we are comparing kick drum mic positions. I've got the same kick drum mic, an Audix D6, and I've positioned it in a number of different places inside the drum. We're going to compare the sounds, see how they differ, and see if there are any similarities. Let's jump straight in. So I've got the Audix D6 here. I've got it in 8 different positions. The first is 3 inches off the head, dead centre, straight in front of the beater. Then the same distance away, but off to the side. Then I've got it 6 inches from the head, dead centre, and off to the side. 12 inches from the head, dead centre, and off to the side. And 16 inches from the centre, off to the side. Now the 16 inches away is acting more like a kind of outside kick mic, so I'm expecting that to be quite different from the others. I'm going to play the examples now. I'm going to start with the 3 inches off centre. I'm going to skip the 3 inches on centre. We're going to listen to that in a moment. But let's take a listen to how these kick sounds differ as we move the microphone. So the thing that occurred to me there, listening to these microphones, is that there are a lot of similarities. I was expecting a far bigger difference between the microphones. If we take a listen to the 6 inches away on centre or off centre, that's really got the same kind of knock to it. And the 12 inch as well, there are some similarities there. With the 6 inches away from the centre, you get a lot of that familiar slap that you have with the Audix D6. Let's take a listen to that just soloed. You get that slap, but you get a really tight bottom end. If you compare that to 16 inches away from the head, and again on centre, you're going to get quite a different sound. Listen to the low end. It's far looser in the 16 inches away. If we listen to the off centre of those two, we have similarities, but the bottom end is not quite as tight in the off centre 6 inch away. This 16 inch off centre is the most different of the lot. The low end really loosens off and you don't get as much of that familiar slap. But this kind of knock, this kind of attack that you're getting off the beater is there with all of them. I think this is a reflection of the microphone that I'm using. If I were using something that has far less slap to it, for example, the old D12, something like that, or the Audio-Technica, the ATM mic, you might not get as much of that attack everywhere in the drum. But because we're using this D6, we are getting that attack. So I think one of their main marketing points was that it sounds great wherever you're putting it in the drum, which is really obvious here. I'm going to play you the 3 inches away on the centre. The reason I didn't start off with this is because we're really getting a fair amount of overloading on the microphone. If we take a listen to it, I'm going to unmute all these sections now. Let's just listen to it in the mix, and then we'll hear it outside the mix as well. And it's just too close for comfort. It's just too close to get anything really useful out of it. As a lone kick mic, it's not going to be of much use. But you do get that really sharp attack there. There's elements of overloading when I've hit the kick drum a bit louder, but it's important to understand that not all drummers are going to hit the drum in exactly the same way. Some might be slightly lighter footed, so you need to take that into account. If you've got someone who is going to be really heavy on the kick drum, such as I have been, then you're going to need to adjust your microphone position to reflect that. Now, I play with the beater buried in the drum. That means that when I hit the bass drum, I don't bring the beater back. It just stays in the bass drum skin until the next hit. I think if we go to the 16 inches off centre, you can really hear that. You get some of the overtones of the actual skin itself, and you can kind of hear that hum a little bit. Let's take a listen. Now this is because it's at the side of the drum, you're getting some of that resonance off the edge of the head. And we're also going to get that from 3 inches away, but it's just going to sound slightly different. Let's take a listen. It's a bit tighter, but you're still getting some of the resonance off the head. So that's something you need to bear in mind. Now I also recorded this with the microphone 1 inch away from the kick. And this was a bit of a disaster. It overloaded it so much, but I think it's important to listen to it. It's only really overloading when it's straight in front of the capsule. So the capsule is 1 inch away from where the bass drum is actually being hit. So it stands to reason that it's going to overload. But when it's 1 inch away and off to the side, it gives quite a unique sound. Let's take a listen to it in the mix now. You get loads of attack off there, but you also get quite a nice controlled bottom end. And this one surprised me, so that's 1 inch away from the head, off centre, just towards the edge of the drum. I want to take a listen to this process now, how it would be in a mix. So I've got the processing bypassed as it is, but let's bring it back in. I've got some of the virtual mix rack from Slate Digital on here. I really like these plugins. I'm adding a bit of top end as I normally would in a mix scenario. The D6 has a fair amount of top end as it is, but I like to add a bit more just to get it to punch through, depending on the genre. And I'm taking out a fair amount, 9 dB at around 330 Hertz. That's just to get rid of the boxiness. And I'm not adding any bottom end here because I think it's fairly weighty as it is. I'm compressing as well. It's coming down to around 7 dB, but kind of sitting in the 4 to 7 dB range for the most of the time. I want to take a listen to how these sounds differ when we've got them processed. Because once we're processing them, the sounds do actually change far more. Let's take a listen to that now. This is soloed again. We're not going to listen to it in the mix right now. And I'm skipping that 3 inches on again. So starting with 3 inches off center. This is where the sound gets completely transformed. In that 16 inches off center, you get so much more of the resonance, but you get a fair amount of knock in there as well. Take one more listen. You can really hear that I'm burying that kick drum beater. You get that familiar knock sound, but what I've noticed is in the closer microphones, the 3 inches from center and the 6 inches, you get that slap and it kind of overtakes the bottom end. The bottom end gets a bit tighter in comparison because the top end is overtaking it. Let's take a listen to the 6 inches on center with EQ and then without. Although we're not actually touching that bottom end, we're not adding anything, we're not taking anything away, because we're adding that top end, the slap is overtaking the bottom end. And in relative terms, it's kind of coming down a bit, but it's also tightening. There's some really interesting differences here. And what I've done is created some sample packs completely for free that you can download in the description. I'll put in some Slate Trigger TCI files of all of these drums, excluding the horrible distorted ones, so you can use them for your next productions. So there you have it. I think the thing to take away from this is that moving the microphone is going to change the sound drastically. Often it's going to change it far more than actually changing the microphone itself. If we move the microphone away slightly, even to 12 inches, it's going to sound far different than 9 inches closer, 3 inches away. If you change it on center, off center, especially with the processing, it's going to change the sound drastically. In those TCI files, you can blend the sounds. So if you like the bottom end of the 16-inch off-center, you can blend that with the 6-inch on-center to get a nice, fully rounded kick drum sound. Thanks a lot for watching. Make sure, if you haven't done already, to check out the snare drum microphone comparison that I did before. And next up is going to be a rack tom. Make sure you subscribe, make sure you hit like. Take care.